Hello everybody, we are on strike two. So we are waiting for Chanie to join. We had to just update our Instagram apps and we are waiting for some of you to show up and we're going to get this party started. Okay, Chanie, let's see. Accept. One more time. Accept. It didn't give me like a notification, so I think we're good.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
It worked.
Yes.
Instagram is so sensitive.
Totally. Like a rejected individual.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I feel like we have so much to cover. I literally printed out your notes.
Did you print out the updated one? I opened it up just in case
yes,
I forget anything.
I did. I got the updated because I didn't want to I wanted to have your points because I thought they were great that you added. So I think the overview for tonight is really giving singles strategies to find their voice, build their inner strength, not going into necessarily every nitty gritty situation that people get into, but really I feel like this is like a foundational conversation and really helping singles. And I think that, you know, because we're both like older singles, I guess, the perspective, yeah, we have to have the air quotes. The perspective is coming from that. So like, I do think that there's what to be gained for a younger single, but I feel like if somebody feels like they're a younger single and this doesn't pertain to them, that doesn't mean that you have to adopt these strategies, you know, like it's okay to be where you are and how you are, if that makes sense.
Even though I do wish sometimes that like there was someone like me when I was younger who would have like been able to tell me these things. Or...
Yes, I hear that too. Yeah, like giving you permission to like, you don't have to like check off every box just because you're like 18 and dating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So 18-year-olds out there and anyone that considers themselves a younger single, feel free to adopt any of these strategies if they work for you or if they sound enticing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds
okay. Good. Awesome. So our first topic is like finding and expressing your voice. So I feel like the first piece to that is like how to assert yourself, build confidence, and like develop that. And it doesn't only have to do with dating. And I think you expounded on that. So I'm going to give you the floor.
Yeah. So asserting yourself can be really hard. It might surprise people to know that I actually was like the quiet girl in the back of the class in high school. And like my principal didn't believe that I was the main part in the play in 10th grade.
Oh, wow.
No, not my school teacher. Did I say principal? Not my principal. Okay. Not my principal. She believes it.
Okay.
but I think that in general, finding your voice can be really hard because especially when it comes like from the dating aspect, like as soon as you feel like you're like in shidduchim and pretty much it's like for people who are coming back from seminary, as soon as they get off the plane, it's really hard. You don't want to like offend anyone. You kind of feel like you're relying on everyone around you to get married, and you kind of feel like you don't have permission to have a voice and to assert yourself. And I feel like as a younger person, I didn't like ever think about the mental health implications of that, and just the fact that like that took away from like you building confidence and just, you know, growing up as like a mature adult. And I think that like learning to assert yourself doesn't necessarily mean like that people think, oh, you have to be loud and abrasive. It's more about learning what you like and dislike, learning what your comfort level is, and just learning how to assert that. And that can be really challenging and really hard, especially when you're dating and feeling like you have to cave to everyone else's likes and dislikes. So I think that like that has been a challenge when I was younger, and then growing up in the last few years of my adulthood, I've definitely become a lot better at that.
Yeah.
I think even having this platform, like not to go off on a tangent about having an Instagram, but you know, it's kind of something that's given me like a lot of inspiration, and I've met a lot of cool people, and I'm really happy that I've done it. But some people have been like, why would you do this while dating? And like, you know, maybe people are going to say no, and people have said no because of that. But, you know, it's something that I enjoy and has brought a lot of like inspiration and connection to my life. And then as far as like therapy goes, I think therapy is very helpful for asserting yourself and kind of helping you navigate when you have different situations, and it becomes difficult when you're not used to asserting yourself or saying no. I think a therapist has been very helpful in kind of like talking through those different scenarios.
Right. And even for people, I think people have a hard time even like voicing their thoughts and feelings in therapy. So kind of therapy is like your school for finding your voice on some level too. So it can help you, like you're practicing finding your voice with your therapist, as well as then, you know, being able to use that voice outside in difficult situations. So, and I know that like we're jumping ahead of ourselves maybe a bit because
Right.
we later on, but I love that you said it doesn't mean being loud, and it doesn't mean also like being bratty or like, you know, like I feel like there's so many different ways that people, you know, concern themselves with finding their voice or identifying their wants and needs. It's like I'm needy, or I'm picky, or I'm this, or I'm that. And like it just means being able to identify what you want and then being able to express it in a healthy, adaptive way.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else on that topic that we wanted to say?
Well, I think about, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but the therapy aspect helping with that, I know I wrote this down and I think it's really important, is that a lot of asserting yourself,
Mhm.
like taking it back from like interacting with people who are setting you up, happens in your relationships. And
Mhm.
it's not just about like your romantic relationships. I think a lot of like what I've learned about asserting myself happens in the workplace, like
Yeah.
in the professional setting.
Yeah.
And then in your relationships with friends, like my friendships in the last few years have really like deepened and become more like mature, deeper relationships where I feel comfortable and safe asserting something that bothered me or something that I like or dislike,
Yeah.
and being able to talk that out in a healthy way.
Mhm.
But then that therapy is really cool in that sense too, because, you know, I've like had a situation or a few times, well, let's say I didn't agree with my therapist's approach or something my therapist said bothered me.
Mhm.
And then I was able to have those difficult conversations in like
Yeah.
a safe, productive way. And I think like that's also a really great space, because you want your therapeutic relationship to be like a safe space where you can
Exactly.
say whatever bothered you or anything and have that play out in like a healthy, productive way, which I think also really helps teach you how to assert yourself.
Exactly. And even if it's not easy for you, like working through that piece, like I feel like you make therapy sometimes seem very easy, and probably because you've worked on yourself a lot. But like I know people struggle with that, and that's okay. And then working through that, because that is going to help you outside of therapy have these difficult conversations.
Right. Well, I may make it sound easy, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily easy.
Yeah.
Like,
I
you know,
like to put out that like you sometimes disagree with your therapist. I
right.
feel like people think that that's like there's a problem then, and that's not the truth. That's not the case.
Right. Like, I think
Right.
sometimes people like erroneously think about therapy as just like this lovey-dovey, like easy, like tell me about your day, but it's
Yeah.
not always easy. And also therapists are people, and sometimes they say things that maybe don't resonate, or maybe
Exactly.
you find even hurtful, and like you should be able to bring that up.
Exactly.
But I struggle, like I'm just thinking of a little thing that like I don't, let's say my therapist will sometimes, like I'll say, oh, I need one more minute, I'm running late, and she'll be like, I'm giving you 10 minutes. Like she knows that I'm not like asserting myself enough to
Yeah.
say like, actually, I really need a few more minutes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That's
yeah,
really nice. Yeah. That's a good green flag of a therapist. Like I like
yeah,
that. That's really sweet. Yeah, but that's, yeah, and exactly, like you can also catch yourself when you're not asserting yourself in therapy, and I feel like it's a real relationship. And I think other relationships are a playground. Like I know we'll get to rejection soon, but I feel like dating shouldn't be the only place that you're feeling rejection or that you're feeling like you need to assert yourself. Like I feel like living life fully as much as we can gets us to experience all the highs and the lows, and like we can practice all that in other relationships, and it's not just about the dating. So whether it's finding your voice, whether it's asserting yourself, whether it's rejection, whether it's confusion, it's everywhere. It's not just in your dating life. And when you kind of like learn it in these other relationships, it makes it almost easier to experience it in a dating relationship because you've practiced it in
true,
some.
100%.
Yeah. So I love that. And I apologize. I see that we've had how therapy helps. We didn't even jump ahead when we
No,
spoke about therapy. We had it in our notes, everybody. Okay. Now we're at maybe we like discussed some of this already, but like the practical tips to help people speak out or within more effectively to find your voice essentially. And I feel like you gave some really good examples
yeah.
for that.
Yeah, I wrote down some practical tips about things specific to dating and navigating, suggestions and things like that. So one of the things that I really like that I wrote this down, and something that maybe people don't think about,
Mm-hmm.
is I've noticed that the language that I use is very like wishy-washy
Yeah.
and like soft. And like when someone says like, you know, oh, how'd the date go? You know, I'll be like, I don't think he's for me. That
Right.
leaves like it kind of open-ended for someone to maybe be aggressive and push back. when I know they're not for me. So I will try and like steer away from that kind of language and be more definitive and be like, he's not for me. Thank you very much for thinking of me, you know? And I think it's something subtle that like maybe I've only noticed in the last few years, and I try to do that. Something interesting that I wrote down is being confident in what you are attracted to. I find that as a woman, it's been very hard for me to say, no, thank you. Like, I'm not attracted to his look or something, anything to do with their looks. I feel like I'm automatically looked at as someone who is picky when I know that, I don't know this, but I would hesitate to assume that a lot of men say no because women are just not their look. Right. And I feel like, or there's also a very popular dating website where when you check off no to a match, you have an option physical look. And like, I used to never click that. I would just write personality. And now I'm like, no, sometimes I'm going to write that because this is just not my look. So sometimes I've said that, and I feel like I used to not do that. And I think that it's okay to do that as a woman. Right. And then I think, what was this other idea I wrote? So a common controversy that I talk about on my Instagram is people like don't know if they should get back to someone that they're attempting to set up if, let's say, the answer is no. They like worry that if they get back to you and the answer is no, that you're going to be offended. So a lot of times you have people reaching out asking for your shidduch resume, your dating profile, or coming up with this idea, do you know this person? And then you never hear from them. And then it like, for me, it compounds the amount of rejection that you're dealing with, besides for going on dates. That's not, the guy says no and you were interested, etc. It's like this chronic ghosting from people. And I know they probably don't mean badly. And a lot of times the guy didn't even say no, they were busy. Or maybe they were busy and it's a no, but that's fine. And so because I know that a lot of people don't necessarily know what to do and sometimes think people would not appreciate hearing that the guy said no, I will assert myself and clearly say, please let me know either way if they are interested, so that I can clearly tell that person, like, this is what I need, this is what I want. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not emotionally attached to the outcome. I just want that file closed in my brain.
Right, exactly. Or they could tell you, like, I didn't reach the person, or he's busy, whatever that means. Or, like, I love that. And it's so interesting. Like, this is where I mean, like, personal preference plays a role, because for me, like, of course, that's happened so many times, and I don't care. Like, I'm like, you do not have to get back to me. To me, like, not getting back is a no. And, like, to me, it's like, fine, like another safe night, you know, whatever that is. But like, and to me, like, so I feel like that's totally cool though. But like, I love that you know that, and you'll say, like, please let me know either way. And of course, like, I've had times where you go out on a date and you don't hear back. That's, to me, that's awful. Then it's like, no, I want to, like, you can say no and you can say the most despicable things, but like, just say something, you know, like, that to me is,
well, that's legit ghosting.
But
I think people don't realize that there are probably a lot of people also like me who would just want to hear either way.
100%.
And I think they don't realize that, like, maybe someone wants that. So this is a situation where you can express that. Like, it's so easy to just let the person know. Don't assume that they know to communicate back. A lot of people will think the opposite and rather not hear.
Exactly. And I love the other point that you said as well, of like, really be careful how you phrase things for other people, for yourself even. Like, I don't think, if you're still thinking, then think. Give yourself the time to think, and you deserve that time. But if it's like you came to a conclusion, then there's a way to say that in a classy, assertive, non-offensive way, by just saying, he is not for me, like, but thank you so much for thinking of me, versus like, I don't think, I'm not, you know, not at this time, not for now. I definitely struggle with that. Like, I'm always like the not for now person. But I'm like working on myself. It's like, if it's a no, it's a no, you know.
It's really hard. And I don't know if I'm skipping ahead, but it's just bringing up for me that a lot of times, like, besides for like it being hard to say no, which we are skipping ahead, or we're introducing, but like, we all go into this system with like the impression that we need to be like these edelmädels, like docile, all the adjectives that you read on these guys' profiles. I don't know if it's inadvertent on their part, but like, they use adjectives like sweet and like edel and all of these adjectives that kind of convey this like fake caricature of what a woman should be, which is someone who's just like always compliant, very passive. And it kind of, I feel like scares a lot of women into submission, even in how they talk and communicate and how they say no. And I think that that's harmful.
Yeah, we just got a comment. Hi, I'm still waiting for a girl to tell me yes or no. I guess that's like on our topic. Yeah, waiting is hard. That's what this conversation is about. Yeah, but I totally hear what you're saying. And like, I think that, yeah, it doesn't like change your personality or make you like, masculine or aggressive or anything like that if you know how to assert yourself and find your voice. And it's all practicing how to express it in a way that feels good for you, you know? If you still can have that, if an Edelmadel is the type of, you know, persona that you want, you can express and find your voice with that persona still intact. Everyone has like a different persona, and that's okay, but it doesn't mean that you shut down your voice. I guess that's like our point here. Okay, we totally went to our next topic, which was great which is the boundaries. So like the permission to say no, I think that we bled into that beautifully, giving yourself permission to say no. And I think that takes a lot of practice. It's not just for us. It's not just for people that are single. It's not just for women. I think that everybody has a hard time saying no. I think women probably struggle with that more than men. I totally made that up, like, but I'm sure there's a study that supports that. I think
so. There is. I mean, there's also, I was reading recently about women in the workplace. Like the way women communicate in the workplace is exactly how I just said I would communicate when I'm not interested in a guy. Like the emails that a woman sends versus a man in the workplace is a lot more like softer and less like direct. So I do think it's something. I think you can say that women struggle with this more.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's what I was hoping. I was like, I feel like there's for sure a study that I read somewhere or heard some podcast that like for sure supports that.
Let's just say anecdotally, we believe.
Exactly. Prove us wrong. But okay, so what were we saying over here? That yes, that it's harder. It's harder for, I think we've even written that, yeah, that it's harder because we want that adjective of like sweet, refined, compliant. And I think that like we can have, you can be all those things and you can still learn how to say no. So the first step I think to boundaries is giving yourself permission to say no. I think that was like the whole point there, which is like you have to first like acknowledge like I can say no, and now I just have to find out how to say no. And I think that's our next point. So you want to hit that one?
Yeah. So, oh, by the way, Sybil's validating what we're saying about women having to add exclamation points in their emails to sound friendlier. I type with a lot of exclamation points. But anyways, yes. How to say no is not easy, and it takes a lot of practice. Specifically in dating, it definitely often involves like asking a trusted friend how to word something better, or confirming that I worded it well. Asking my therapist. I think part of like your personal growth, I hope as like I get better at saying no to certain things, is to be able to do that more independently without outside guidance and advice. But it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. Obviously it depends on the scenario. Sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes like I don't need feedback. I'm listening to my gut right now and I know what I'm doing and I'm fine. But it really depends on the situation.
Exactly. And I think like being able to like make decisions for ourselves, I always think of decision as like a muscle building process. So like if you can learn to decide things by yourself, even if it's not, like literally like what should I have for lunch? Should I go here with that person or should I stay home? Should I do this or that? Like being able to not have to bounce that off your like friend or whatever it is for you, you're building that muscle of like, I can make these decisions, and then it kicks in, it's already there on some level when you have to do a 60-second plank, which is when you have to make a decision for the guy or for the matchmaker or whatever that is, so I think that that's a piece to it, but yeah, I think it's really hard. And I love that you said that, like the practice, the growth is in being like not having to like get as much affirmation for your decision. So whether if in the past you've had to ask 3 people, maybe now you only have to ask 1, and then eventually you're like, well, that was easy for me. Like I was sure it was not for me. So like I was able to do it by myself, and like really taking a moment to be proud of yourself. Like I've definitely had those moments where it's like, I feel confident enough to say this answer by myself and like not need external, like you can get the validation after and it feels really good because like you didn't need it prior, you know?
And that's in your screenshot folder. Well, thank you.
So what do you mean? Say that again?
Your screenshot folder. Well, thank you.
Exactly.
But speaking about asking 3 people, I think also in dating, like sometimes you tell like 5 friends that you're dating someone, and then you ask 5 people for their advice, and I think that can be really muddling and confusing.
Not everyone has 5 friends, Chanie.
I didn't say 14.
I know. I had to like throw that there because like I remember I was watching your stories like a few weeks ago, and it was like all about your friends, and I was like, this girl has a nice amount of friends. Well, now you're pretty friendly on WhatsApp.
Okay, 3 people. But yeah,
totally echo that sentiment. I think that the more people you ask, like sometimes, you know, naturally more people get involved in your dating life because it's like from a friend, he knows the friend, she knows the friend, and the aunt and the cousin, and to me that's always like, oh my god, this is going to be a party, but like not in a good way. You know, like this is like everyone involved, and like if it can always, you know, try to keep it as like intimate as possible, you're going to be so much happier. Like it's so much easier. But yeah, definitely.
My only friend is Chanie. I don't know if her husband's writing that or she is. but yeah, it definitely, like as someone who can be anxious about dating, it definitely like can cause more anxiety if you feel like you have to give a whole bunch of people an update when you're still trying to process the experience yourself and figure out what you actually want to do.
Or if you're going to say no, and like so many people that you really care about and that really care about you are involved. Like I've had that recently, and it's just like, it just makes it 10 times harder, you know? It does, because it's like, you know, people that really care about you and that you care about, and then it's like, we'll get into that whole thing about how to deal with offending people. We'll get to that. But yeah, I think that, you know, having the like really being selective about who's that 1 to 3 people that you need to ask before you make a decision, and then working your way up to like, you know, lessening that list, and then being able to ultimately make some decisions on your own. But the first step is giving yourself permission, and then how to say it is just, I mean, did we say how to say it? I think that like not giving that like wishy-washy of like, I think, I'm not, you know, not for now, like trying to leave out those words and really being assertive about it.
Yeah.
And strong about it in like in a appropriate way. And then we spoke about, then we have over here how to deal with like the guilt after saying no. So I know that comes up a lot for people.
Yeah.
And for myself as well. Like I'm a big guilt junkie, especially when it comes to that. So yeah, let's hear what you have to say on that one.
Our people are very good at guilt.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Jewish guilt.
Exactly.
But,
it's like totally, I think I got like, yeah, I got a nice dose. Yeah. Very Jewish.
But I think with guilt, there's like, it helps. Guilt is like could be a very strong emotion.
Yeah.
So it helps to like step back, and I think I talk about this later, but like really try and be present about, okay, why am I feeling this guilt? Mm-hmm. You know, is it stemming from, I'm worried I'm never going to get married, and I said no? Mm-hmm. Is it stemming from, I'm scared that I'm going to offend the person who set me up? I'm scared I'm going to offend the person I went out with. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's guilt because I'm not sure if I'm listening to my gut, and does my gut know what it's doing, and all those emotions involved. But then stepping back and just thinking logically and trying to put the guilt down and be like, okay, this is why I said no. And like, I know I felt it afterwards. I know this was the right reason, and kind of like logically reminding yourself why you even made that decision, I think is helpful. And then I
feel also like live with that uncertainty. I feel like I'm like thinking what my mom would say, because she's always like she's like an uncertainty freak. Like she's like, it's okay to like not be 1,000% sure. Like it's okay to be 99% sure or 95% sure. Like that's enough.
I really like that. Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah, my mom's like so into that because she specializes in OCD, so she's always like, you don't need that 100% certainty. Because as you were saying about like repeating to yourself like all the reasons you like said no, I was thinking like people can get caught in that like rabbit hole or like a loop of like, but I feel guilty. Okay, let me repeat every reason I said no, but I feel guilty. You know, like it becomes like almost like an obsession and compulsion. Not that you have OCD or anyone has OCD if they do that, but like to really be like, it's okay if I don't feel 1,000% certain. Like 90% is so great too. Like that's a great reason to make a decision on 90% of a feeling, you know?
I like that. I like that very much.
Awesome. Yeah. And for me, I know that when I feel guilty, a lot of times it's really not guilt. It's just that guilt is like such a comfortable, familiar emotion. And it's really something else. And like even you said, it's like a fear. It's a fear of, will I ever get married? Or will I this? Or will I that? Or like, what will that person think of me? And like, that's, I think, or it's a sadness, or it's like frustration, or it's like, I was so hopeful and now I'm disappointed. Like there are so many other emotions that can be in the way, but like kind of guilt can just like take over the party and be like, well, you can just feel guilty now because you know what I'm saying? You did it again or whatever that is. So like, I think that's piece, like really being able to say like silence the guilt for a moment and give voice to the other feelings, that has helped me, because then you can get in touch with like sadness or anger or frustration or fear. And then when you feel those feelings, all of a sudden the guilt is like not there anymore because it really was never there to begin with. It was just a cover up. So I think that's helped me a lot, to be just more authentic with like how I actually feel and like move on and not get stuck in like guilt. Cause it's like, it's not the appropriate emotion usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that very much.
Awesome. Okay. Then we got into like how to deal with the fear of offending people.
And you wrote a perfect thing, so go for it.
Yeah, like maybe it's okay to offend people. Like we are not responsible for other people's reactions. Like obviously, you know, if your response was appropriate, you did the best job that you could. You said it in the most, you know, sweetest way that you can with asserting yourself and being authentic to who you are. You're not responsible for other people being offended. And I find that most of the time it's like mind reading, you know, it's like we're envisioning that that person is, you know, upset or offended, and usually they're not. But even if they are, that's okay. Like it's so okay, because you can't have everybody like you in the world at every given moment. Like it's just not possible. So like let it go kind of thing. And like if you're uncomfortable, that's okay. Like you can be uncomfortable that maybe I offended that person and be uncomfortable, and eventually that feeling will pass, and that's okay.
Right. Like you don't ever have to be the sacrifice to other people's emotions. Again,
Love that. Yeah.
proceeding with care and being kind in your refusal or asserting your boundaries, but you can't be responsible for everyone else.
Exactly. I feel like most of this live we were talking about like saying no and not enough of rejection. So like we have to get into that piece too. Like somebody asked that, like somebody asked a question about like rejection.
Yeah.
But I didn't even realize that like most of these things were about, I guess, asserting yourself, finding your voice. It makes total sense, but it's one half of the experience, you know. Then there's the whole other piece where it's like being, you know, on the rejection side. So we'll definitely get to that, everybody. But yeah, you were saying that
I think we're almost there. We're by that.
Exactly. We are. Exactly. Okay. Awesome. So therapy. Now we get into therapy and like how therapy / coaching has helped you. And I love what you wrote here, actually. Like you're like, it's very helpful for objectively reviewing dates. Like I feel like people think therapy is this like lofty thing where you're constantly like going through your childhood or your future or whatever it is, or, you know, assessing your dreams, or talking about your trauma. Like trauma is now the trendiest, you know, therapy piece, which whatever, we won't talk to that right now.
He was gaslighting me.
Right. Exactly. But like really just like having someone objective that shares your, like, you know, your goal. They're rooting for you, and they like, you can just really just like review your dates and like not think that it's like your mother that like really wants you to get married tomorrow or yesterday, and it's not your best friend who set you up. Like it's someone objective.
Right. Yeah, so that's been very helpful. It's been very helpful for, like you said, like reviewing dates, discussing, you know, behaviors or things that made me uncomfortable. I think also I have a lot of anxiety about dating. Like it's not a pleasant process for me. I don't usually enjoy it. A lot of times it's first dates that can be uncomfortable or just not great. And, you know, that is not fun for me. I'd rather stay at home and be on the couch. My therapist has given me...
You're saying that. Like, I never think of you as someone that has anxiety for like a first date. Like,
I so do. I so do.
I love that. Like disclosure. It's funny. Like I have anxiety about 1,000 other things, but like first dates don't give me anxiety. So I'm like, cool.
Oh, okay. I so do. It gives me a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Some of it I think is like residual from like growing up in this system. I also I think we talk a lot about this in therapy, but like because of like how we date and it's usually marriage minded.
Yeah.
Like before I've even gone out, I'm like, okay, so like theoretically, if I would get married to this person, I would have to move here, and I'm planning the wedding in my head. So like, of course, the first date's stressful when you're thinking that. But like I feel like
I'm just like, how is he gonna drive? Are we gonna go eat? What are we gonna do? What time am I gonna get home?
Worried about that too. But I am someone with like an imagination. I like to write. So like I just think about these things. And
that makes sense. And then you're getting ahead of yourself, and then we all do that for sure.
And then it also it adds to the crushing, you know, disappointment and rejection when it's like, yeah, that's not marrying this person. I'm not planning a wedding. But like my therapist will always remind me about, you know, staying present and you're just going to meet this person. You're not going to plan a wedding. You're going to learn about yourself. You're going to think about, okay, how does this person make me feel? Why did this person make me feel this way? What are some behaviors that I really don't appreciate? What are some things that I notice? Things like that. Kind of like a learning experience about myself.
Yeah.
And speaking about how he's going to drive and what he's going to drive, like you mentioned, this isn't something that I learned in therapy, but actually, not to say the P word, but the pandemic really helped me in a weird way when it came to dating, because dating became so different and we had to modify things.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave me permission to like change the way I date. So one thing that I really like that helps me as someone who's more of an anxious dater is that during the pandemic, there were all these video dates, right? So a lot of times I'll actually, instead of having like a phone call before meeting the person, which I find the phone call to just be like unhelpful, awkward, unhelpful, like either text and meet up or like don't have that phone call. It doesn't help.
I'm with you, girl. Oh my God.
But what I like to do instead of a phone call, sometimes I'll just set up a video chat, like a quick video chat with someone. Even though I'm generally comfortable going out on dates as far as, you know, health safety goes, but like I find these video chats to be so enlightening and helpful, and like a screening call, honestly. And it preserves so much of my energy and like my mental health, honestly, because, you know, you're in the comfort of your own home. You don't have to stay on very long. You don't have to be completely dressed up. And so I really like that. That's something that I don't know that I can attribute therapy to, but the pandemic taught me this trick. And I also really like to meet my dates there. I don't like guys picking me up. I know it's kind of a societal convention, but I find it completely awkward, uncomfortable, especially when it's a first date and you maybe just spend like an awkward car ride back knowing this is never going anywhere, and adds to the length of the date. It's awkward. They open the door for you, they close it on your dress, etc., you know. And it's very helpful for me to know that like I have an escape route, and it definitely helps me like during the day to know that I'm going home separately. So that's a little trick that I really like.
Amazing. And I'm assuming you start yourself by like saying that and moving forward, like now, like when you go.
Right. Like, yeah, that's true. Like, let's say like when I had a recent first date, I said, if it's okay, I'll meet you there. And they're like, oh, okay. I've had guys be like, oh, okay. Like a little bit like, oh, that's maybe they think it's weird. I don't really care. I think one guy thought I had like a bad experience, which for the whole safety aspect, which I didn't, but you know, some guys are like, wow, like no one does that. But yeah, there is a safety aspect to that is kind of out of the scope of this, but like, you know, girls just unwittingly go into guys' cars that maybe they don't know anything about, and you know,
exactly. It depends on how you research the person before. I think it depends a lot on like the community that you're from, but I agree that
but even the community from you're from, I think like I've heard horror stories in my DMs, like people don't necessarily think about it, but going into a vehicle with a guy is kind of like an intimate, enclosed space, and you don't really know people, no matter how many references you call, no matter how religious, etc. they are. It's still a safety issue going into a vehicle with who in essence is a stranger, you know. So that definitely has like made my dating so much more stress-free. What else as far as there?
About like therapy, or actually navigating like and validating your internal and external pressures. But I feel like that's to that point, like being able to like date in a way that like reduces some of your anxiety. I think that's brilliant. You know, like really being able to figure out like what makes me so anxious. About like a first date. And if like having that video call before is like makes you so much less anxious. I'm saying for anyone that's listening, like you can ask that, like the shadchan or the matchmaker that, and be like, is it okay if we set up a video call like for 5 minutes before? Like it makes me feel more comfortable. Like that's so cool, you know? Or is it okay if we meet there on the first date? I'm more comfortable like that. Like
yeah. And I just think that any guy that's respectful, like even if that might be different or something, like they should be able to respect that. And if someone can't respect the basic modification like that, I don't think I want them. I know I don't want them. Correction. Caught myself.
Yeah, you caught yourself beautifully though, before I could even say anything. So where were we over here?
Oh, what else did I write here? As far as rejection, I think that we went a little backwards, but I think rejection is really hard. And I think one of the main things that I discuss in therapy, and I don't know that I have like a good solution or tip to this, is that feeling desirable is really hard in a system where like I honestly don't get that many dates. And I can't really say that I've been in a relationship. Like I've had guys where I've dated for, you know, quite a few dates, but and a lot of people I know are like me and maybe don't get many dates or have never been in a relationship. And I think it's really hard to not like to just honestly believe it will happen and think that you're worthy of that kind of love. It's a really big struggle, you know, and I'm also someone who's like, when I'm not being emotional, I'm very logical and evidence-based.
Yeah.
It's literally in my profile about evidence-based medicine.
Yeah.
And as much as I can say I have a lot of friends, we're not going to say how many, and I know people like me, even who aren't my friends. I'm pretty likable in general, usually. but you know, I'm evidence-based. If I can't look back and say, okay, but I haven't been able to achieve that kind of relationship, like what is wrong with me? It's really hard to still believe that, you know, you're worthy of that kind of love, and maybe it's not your fault. And my therapist is kind of good for grounding me in that way. Something that she says a lot, and I really think is helpful and true, is that it's just a very logical fact that dating is a numbers game. It's spoken a lot about in the attachment theory book, because of like the different types of people, like secure, anxious, and avoidant. How secure people are, like often, like a lot of them get married early, so then it's like the anxious and avoidant people left, and like the avoidant, whatever. I'm going on a tangent, but in general,
interesting to me. Like I'm willing for that. I'm open to that tangent.
Yeah, but I don't remember the end of it. But in general, it's a numbers game. So if you've reduced your dating options, I mean, I have friends who aren't Jewish and religious. They date many different types of people, and dating is still kind of a cesspool. Regardless, if you have this massive like filter on your options, which is like if you're only dating religious Jewish men and you have other filters based off your compatibility and what you're looking for, you're left with a very, very, very small pool of people. So it's only normal that, you know, you might not have found someone. My therapist is very helpful for looking at me and being like, it's math. So that I have found really helpful for that. But again, it's still really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard not to let that rejection get you down when, yes, I try to fill my life with like rich friendships and other kinds of relationships, but it's hard. Something that I wanted to talk about that I do a lot and I like share a lot on my Instagram is dating myself. So besides for meeting friends and having friends, etc., I think it's a really important thing to do, whether you're single or in a relationship, is to be comfortable with your own company. Is really important for also building your confidence, being able to assert yourself, and for thinking that you're worthy of love and you are good company. Is dating yourself. So whether that means going for coffee by myself, or sometimes I've like gone to the city on a day out myself. I'll go to Central Park myself with a book. Unfortunately, but fortunately, the phones are great crutches for this. Like, you don't even have to feel funny. You're sitting on your phone, whatever it is. But I'll go to dinner by myself. I'll go to a museum myself. I went to Italy myself for 2 weeks.
That was like wild, by the way. Like I was like, oh my god.
My therapist supported that decision. She was very proud. But yeah, it was very hard. It was very difficult. Sometimes
your self-respect and your self-love. Like that's how you do it.
Yeah. And what, you know, I was thinking about this today. One of the scariest things that I did there was one Shabbos meal I had reserved, like a meal for myself, and they host it at the restaurant, and it's very like sit down, formal. And I had to go I almost didn't go. I had to like talk myself into going, because Friday night I had done the same thing, but I had met some girls at a tour that I did on Friday, and they invited me to join their table. But on Shabbos day, I was eating at a restaurant that I didn't know anyone, and I didn't have my phone because it was Shabbos. I didn't even have a book because I was being a really good Jew, and I wasn't carrying because there was no Erev. So I went to sit at a restaurant table myself, no one to talk to. Thank God there was good wine, and I just sat for like an hour and a half myself. No one came over to me. I was thinking about it afterwards. Like, I wonder if anyone looked and was like, there's a girl sitting by herself, a woman sitting by herself, and everyone was either couples, families, a few couples.
I'm assuming it's like a Jewish. It was like
it was close. Like I actually happens to be thinking about God and his little hugs. The one thing that ended up happening, which was such a helpful little like hug for me, was that my table was facing the door. Like I was like I was the table closest to the entranceway.
Okay.
And so I was facing the door, so I was just people watching, even though, that was the other thing. I had hoped that the restaurant would be outside, but they did it inside for Shabbos.
Mm-hmm.
If it would have been outside, then I just people watch. But
right.
inside, what are you looking at awkwardly by yourself?
Right.
So yeah, I was able to people watch all the people coming in and asking for service. They're like, no, we're closed for Sabbath. But yeah, that was a really hard thing to do. But at the end, it was like so cool. It was like, I was so proud, and it gives you this confidence and this self-love that like, I'm worth it. I can sit by myself. I can do this. It's a very cool thing to be able to do that I don't think people do enough.
I love that. I have to do that. Like, I have to start doing like self dates.
Yeah, it's the best. And you don't get bored with your own company.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't think it would be a problem. I probably do it that like thinking that I do it, but like I feel like intention is such an important piece, and I feel like to bring intention to that would be so much better. But yeah.
And it's very fascinating because like when you go to a restaurant, you say a table for one, sometimes you like watch everyone else's reactions, and they're like one time I started doing this, I feel like when I used to go to the city sometimes for like appointments or something, and then I would like go to a restaurant I liked on the way back, and they would like, the waiters would be like, for one, where's your man? I'm like, he's not here yet. Like, but then they would give me extra food, so it was fine.
Hello, and then they like take away the other plate that was there, you know, like like Bill.
You sure you don't want to sit at the bar? No, I want a table.
Love it. Yeah. That is really, really funny, but also inspiring, and I really like that, and I think that everyone listening is going to appreciate that piece of advice. Yeah, like learning to like, I think that like people think like self-love is this lofty thing, but it's really like it comes from like tiny things that we do that build even self-respect. I think self-respect is like the foundation for self-love, and like you respect yourself when you keep a commitment, when you do things that you know are good for you, even if they were hard, when you go out of your comfort zone for yourself, and you come through for yourself, and you like, that's when you build self-respect, and that's when you start like really loving yourself. It's not just from like, you know, having 10 spa days. It's not all about that.
Right. It helps. Exactly. Like, yeah, self-love and self-care is very much misconstrued in the general society as like these grand lavish vacations. Not to say that that's not self-love, but self-love happens so much in like the little things that are not big gestures. Self-love is even cleaning your apartment, you know, for you, yourself, and you. Like that's self-love.
Making your bed in the morning. It's like the tiny doing the dishes before we have a live.
Did you do dishes? I did my dishes. I actually have my linen in the washer, just saying. Did you do your laundry?
just the dishes.
Oh my gosh. But also on that note, like I also think that whole thing about, well, okay, I guess we can say unlearn things we were told, but the whole thing about like being half a person and like waiting for that person, I'm a very big advocate about, yes, taking the lavish vacation that you want to take if you can, not waiting for a relationship to do that.
Right.
But even smaller things like buying, if you really want this fancy set of linen, like buy that set of linen. Like don't wait for a guy or whoever to start living the life you want to live, or to like fulfill your dreams. Like, yes, maybe you want to be able to do that with that person. Well, then do it again with that person. You know, it's like, don't wait. Get the profession that you want to get. And don't wait.
Like, it's not, don't wait to have that kid, or don't wait to like till you lose weight, or don't wait to like we're constantly pinning our like happy moments, or what we envision to be like happy moments or deserving moments, on something else. I feel like now the new trend for 2023 was like, don't postpone joy. Like, you don't need like, you don't need an excuse to like do that lavish thing for yourself. Like, just being alive is enough of a reason to treat yourself beautifully, and like not to postpone what you want or what you deserve for that relationship, for that next child, for whatever it is. And I think 100%. That we can all adopt that regardless of your relationship status. And you see that you wrote that you're a whole person who deserves everything. Pursue that profession. Yeah, I hear that a lot. People are like, you know, I don't like want to do this, but I don't even understand it though. So I mean, like, I obviously can understand it, but like, what does not being in a relationship have to do with like not going back to school or something like that?
I think there's a multifaceted aspect to that. I think on the one hand, some people make professional decisions based off how long schooling is going to take, because they hypothesize they're going to get married within a certain amount of years, and they don't want to do, let's say, a profession that takes more than a certain amount of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the aspect of people feel like there are certain professions in our community that are seen as more like, you know, there are people who get said no to because of their professional decisions. I have people message me who say that they get told no because they are a physician,
Sure.
or other reasons.
I've had people say no to me when because I was a therapist. Like, please, I'm saying anything that you do.
Someone's afraid of being psychoanalyzed. It's a great filler. I'm gonna say I'm a therapist.
Okay. It was years and years and years ago, and it was like I was actually hurt, by the way. You should just know, like, just full disclosure. I was like very offended. I never heard of such a thing. I was like, what's wrong with being a therapist? Like, I was so naive. I mean, not that there's not, like, I was much younger, and yeah, like, it was really, now if that would happen, I'd be like, okay, like, who has the problem here? I'm not sure, but moving on. Now I would not take offense to that. I don't think half as much, if at all. But it definitely hurt. Yeah. Like, I think that's rejection, you know? And yeah, that was like not even, it was like a no, we didn't go out, obviously. It was like, no, she's a therapist. And I think it's happened even more than once, but I'm just thinking of like one particular time. So yeah, I don't think like any profession, anything about anybody can be offensive to somebody else or undesirable to somebody else. Like, that's okay. Like, everyone's allowed their preferences, you know? And like, to think about it, even like, I'm sure you have your preferences of like, I don't want a guy that does that, you know? It's not my thing, you know? And that's okay.
I can't be that picky about that, but yes.
So,
trying to get someone with a job.
I like that. What were we saying? Yeah. And I think that like someone asked about like the trauma of being an older single or being an older single in a community where marriage is everything and paramount. And I think that, you know, I think anything can be traumatic, you know, so I don't want to like neglect that. You know, I feel like it can be traumatic if you are, you know, like experiencing things that are traumatic in that process. I think being in therapy, working through that trauma so that it doesn't become chronic trauma, is really important. And I think that like being able to like use it as like a learning experience of like and like a strengthening experience. Like, I'm getting stronger. Every time I get rejected, I get stronger. Every time somebody says no, I'm getting stronger. Every time I get, you know, I work through like a lot of pressure or confusion, I got stronger. Like, I built my mental strength, my emotional strength. I think like looking at life in that way, I think is really helpful to like reduce the trauma. Like creating a bigger story about it versus like, this is horrible, this is terrible, this is killing me, this is crushing me, versus like, you have a whole life ahead of you. This is a piece of your life that you are going, like, that you're using to your best advantage, even though it really stinks right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know also if that person meant the trauma of the actual, like, to quote the 1840 podcast that I shared with Chanie Cohen. It's like the crisis of the process of dating, and then the crisis of like the experience of living in that marriage-minded community. It might also be that component, but like that's a whole nother topic.
I didn't listen to that podcast. Could you differentiate?
It's really good. You should listen.
Sure.
But they were pretty much saying how people like to call it the shit of crisis. Right? Yeah. The crisis that there are all these people who are not married, who want to get married, etc. So Hannah, I think, she credited this to a different rabbi who had told her this, but he broke it down into, hold on, there's two crises here. There's the crisis of the process of shidduch dating, which is everything that you kind of shared, and going with the matchmakers, etc. And then there's the crisis of the experience of living as like an older single in our community, and how the community doesn't necessarily know how to relate to us other than us being single, and doesn't know how to be inclusive. There's all that trauma, which is traumatic. People treat you kind of like, you know, they infantilize you. That's also how it becomes hard to say no. People kind of like, I'm the married person here in this conversation, so I'm going to tell you how you should be responding to this scenario. You don't know anything, even if you're a mature adult of the age of, I don't know what, and you've had all this life experience. You kind of like you're not treated as like a full-fledged member of the community or a full-fledged adult until you have that ring on your finger. So I think there's a lot of trauma and difficulty navigating that part. So I don't know if that's what that person meant, but yeah.
But maybe that's a good podcast to listen to, sure. And like, yeah, I like that it's differentiated. I'm very big into like really like breaking things down and like getting nitty gritty about like what bothers you and what's the trauma and what's that all about. So I think that that's like a big piece to it. So I guess the rejection piece would be the piece of like the actual process, like the system. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And then I don't think I mentioned this, but something that I really think has been important for me, even though I don't necessarily like going to them, but singles events, very often, the joke is you go there to meet single women to become friends with. And you don't usually walk out of there with dates, which has been my experience. It's very rare that I meet a guy, but in all honesty, like some of my deepest, closest friendships today are from singles events. And I think that like they can be really hard to go to, but you know, I know some people message me that they really struggle finding friends as a single person, and like that is sometimes, as much as they might not be fun to go to, it's like you can be bonded in your trauma there together.
Totally. It reminds me of the last one I went to a few months ago, and like I met so many amazing girls, and like literally like we were about to exchange numbers, and then it was like we didn't, and I'm like I kicked myself after. So anyone,
I got 4 numbers the last event I went to, all wonderful women.
Crazy, yeah. So I did not, but you see the thing is like I'm so happy that we're having this conversation, because like I didn't go in with that mindset, you know, like I went in like I'm here to do my thing. Of course, like I dreaded it. Of course, I didn't want to do it. And of course it ended up being fine. Like it was not as bad as I like anticipated. But like, I wish I would have gone in with the mindset of like, how many girls' numbers can I get tonight?
I mean, I don't know if that has to be like priority.
Like, no. Or like just that perspective of like, you can meet new friends. I don't think I was also in the mindset of like, I'm shopping for friends, which is probably the same truth now, but like, it's still nice to have like people that you know. And yeah, I feel like people do struggle with loneliness a lot, and feeling like you're alone. And it's great to have just that other person, even if it's just like, you know, oh, did you go out with this guy? What was, you know, like it's just another good contact that's in a very similar space and stage as you are. So I love that piece. Okay, then we spoke about like unlearning, or we want to speak about unlearning things that we were told. You want to touch on that for a bit?
Yeah, what did I write down? I wrote attraction grows. I think it's kind of like out of the scope to start going down that whole rabbit hole, but I think that, again, I kind of mentioned about this before, but you're allowed to have thoughts about what you're who you're attracted to, what you're attracted to. And if you're completely turned off by someone, then you're turned off by them. And I think there's like kind of this harmful persona about like, not persona, but this harmful like teaching that you keep getting pushed to go out with people that you are completely not attracted to. And I think there's going to be people who have different thoughts on that, but like in therapy, this has also been helpful to discuss and kind of be validated that like, no, you don't have to keep pushing yourself to go out with someone that you are just completely not attracted to. Granted, I do think there's a component there of the way we date, the way we're like set up is not very organic. And yes, sometimes you meet someone in real life that if you meet organically, you might not have looked at them in the beginning and been like, oh my gosh, so hot, I'm so attracted. But because you organically meet, like the attraction builds. But I think the way that we date, it's really hard to overcompensate that. And it's just different. You have to go out a second time. I don't know who came up with that, but it's kind of like a belief system, and it's super unhelpful. It's draining. It pretty much teaches someone who's dating that they have to ignore their gut and how they felt about the first date. Anytime I felt like when I was younger, people would be like, oh, maybe they were nervous, this, that. Like, that may be so, but you can still learn a lot about a person in a first date. And I feel like anytime I've ever been pressured to go out a second time, when I knew I didn't want to go out a second time, it was just a waste of my time and energy, and that guy's time and energy. So I really think that like that's where the piece comes about learning to listen to your gut and intuition. And just because someone tells you like you should go out a second time does not mean that you should.
Right.
What else did I want to say about that? I guess I could talk about my gut in this sense, but you know, I feel like it's also a harmful thing that like we are not given any credit to our experience and not even our experience, but your gut tells you a lot about how you feel about this person on your date and what kind of cues you're picking up on. Something might be bothering you and you're not even like sure what it is. But I think like no one really gives credit to listening to your gut and your intuition. And when it's so drowned out by everyone else's voices,
like people don't know what that means. Like you need to learn what that even means. No, like
you do need to learn what that, and I don't even know like if there's like a great way to explain what it is, but
Exactly.
But sometimes I mean, your gut is like a very strong sense when you start to listen into it. Like, I'm a very good judge of character and people.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, everyone is obviously different, but everyone has a gut, that instinct that tells them something, that is telling them like, I'm getting a bad vibe here. I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Something is wrong. Something feels inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
All these feelings are kind of like, when you're younger, you're told that like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The gut is kind of silenced, and it's really harmful, because at the end of the day, you're the one that went out on that date.
Mm-hmm.
You're the one that was there in that experience. No one can recreate what you felt there. And it takes a lot of practice to like tune in and listen to what you were feeling or experiencing, because the gut
Mm-hmm.
is like, it's like a subtle experience. It's a subtle feeling. And I think what therapy has helped a lot is that I've had my therapist literally tell me, what is your gut telling you?
Right.
Like, my gut is like at the table, part of this conversation. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a credence that is valuable.
Right.
Like, my therapist is never trying to like talk over my gut.
Mm-hmm.
She trusts my gut. And that is something that's like really valuable and important, that I don't think, let's say, sometimes people who might be guiding people would stop and say. Like, instead
Right.
of trying to, sometimes people just love to insert their opinion about the matter without listening to what you're trying to say.
Right.
And it's a very valuable thing to have someone tell you, what is your gut saying here?
Exactly. And usually I'm thinking, like, how can we define, I love that your therapist like asks you and brings it to the table, like it's a third voice in the room. I think that's so important. Like, I think we like over speak it. Like, we just try to like say it's like anxiety. We talk it away. It's, I think the gut is like your unfiltered voice. It's like you know, like how we say, like, think before you speak, right? And that's a really good thing to keep in mind. But I think that when you're trying to identify like what your gut reaction is, it's like, don't think before you speak. You know, like, what is that? What was that like initial reaction that you had when they said that comment, or they didn't do that, or they, you know, made that face?
Right.
I think that that's like a good thing to like maybe keep in mind. As you're talking, I was thinking about that. I haven't heard it from anyone, but maybe that can be helpful even for myself, like to get in touch with your gut. But I think that, yeah, getting, you know, like not, you know, there's anxiety, there's feelings, there's everything. Everyone has, you know, a lot going on, but then there's still like that voice, and you want to really like decode it, not just say like, oh, that's your anxiousness, or that's your fear of commitment, or that's your whatever else other label you want to put on it. So I think that's cool too. Yes, I love that you said like therapy helps you like stay present, use it as a tool, help you listen to it. And that brings us to our, like, I think our last main topic for tonight is how to get the right guidance from people. You know, whether that's therapy, whether it's someone else that you're close to, a mentor, coach. So yeah, go for it.
Okay, so what did I write here? I think it's tricky. I said it obviously has to be someone that you really trust.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially when we're younger, we get advice from people that maybe we don't think about, like, who is this person to give me advice? Like, what are their credentials here? A lot of times in a marriage-minded community, someone is considered, like, you look to someone for advice because they've managed to get married, or they are a big matchmaker, etc. Not to say that those people don't necessarily provide good advice, but that's not a qualifying factor. The fact that someone has a marriage certificate or has managed to set people up does not the relationship expert make. So I think it's really important to be someone that you trust, that has credentials, that you feel safe confiding in, that is an active listener to you, right? That is actually listening to what you're trying to say and isn't trying to over talk your experience or rewrite what happened with their own narrative that they're trying to impose upon you. What else? Maintains professional boundaries. I mean, this is definitely like important with a therapist, but obviously with anyone who's giving you advice, you know, you don't want to feel like it's someone who's, you know, infringing upon your boundaries or being inappropriate. And yeah, so someone that you're able to have like difficult conversations with, which we like touched upon earlier with a therapist, someone who, you know, you maybe won't agree with, but they're able to have that conversation and just be supportive and not defensive.
Exactly. No, I think that's like all good advice. And like, yeah, I'm thinking if I have anything to add on that. Like, I'm thinking, I know that people work with coaches, like dating coaches, and I think that like a lot of times a dating coach speaks to the girl and the boy that are being set up, the, you know, a man and woman, I should say. And I think like to me that's like if it works out that's amazing, right? But I wonder how that would make you feel in terms of like trusting that person with the things that you're sharing with them. And I'm not saying that you can't trust. I think that you have to like really get in touch with like, you know, who am I getting advice from, and how safe do I feel, right? Like, and not.
I mean, I'm not very objective on this because I have a lot of therapist friends. So like, you know, I very much like, I worry with coaches. Listen, sometimes people tell me you should be a life coach. I'm like, why? Because I'm living life. Like, it's easier. I'm not saying that coaches don't do good work, but you just want to make sure that it's a coach that, you know, you can trust in the same way, like that you can trust to share things that are not going to be reshared, or that is going to give you the right advice. It's just something that you have to, I think, proceed with caution.
Totally. Yeah. I'm like, you know, I have a lot of therapist friends as well. I have some coach friends as well. And I think, I think coaching gets a bad rap. And I think that, you know, therapy has also gotten a bad rap, and like we somehow overcome that. And I think coaches are in the process of like overcoming that too, as long as like they stay in their lane. And I think that there's a place for a great coach. But yeah, I think that the pieces that you have to check for yourself is like, how do I feel when I speak to this person?
Right.
How do they help me get in touch with myself versus just like, do they talk to me or with me?
Right.
Or at me, you know, like those are all like very big differences, even if that's a nuance of, you know, to a word or two. Any red flags that you feel like you want to speak about?
So as far as
an interesting like red flag, I thought that was cool to talk about.
What? Which one?
About the coaches, therapists, like if they're like speaking about their clients on social media.
Yeah. Well, by the way, just to clarify, don't mean like, you know, there are bad therapists, there are good coaches. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean because you're one or the other that you're not going to be good guidance. But anyways, yeah, I wrote here about how I didn't find my therapist in social media. It was actually a referral from a friend. That's another thing that you can look for, like someone that you trust who refers a person. I find this very helpful. But I just said something about like social media, that it's very interesting that like a lot of therapists are active on social media and use that to kind of like, first of all, share therapeutic advice sort of in a social media form, and then also to like get the word out there about their services. But like, I guess like if I was looking for a therapist, I wouldn't want to see my therapist like kind of like demean certain things or kind of like mock things that their clients share, things like that. I think is tricky probably from a therapist perspective to navigate on social media. But that would maybe be
shouldn't be, because there's nothing that your client shares that should be mock worthy. Like you can, you know, like I can't see, I mean, like I know obviously this is what we do all day, right? Like therapists put out their content on OK Clarity, and I'm like, it's always very like informative, psychoeducational. It's never like anecdotal of like, my client said this and I was like, oh my God, you know what I'm saying? Like that would be like very poor taste and not something that would pass our bar for like.
But you could probably, for like at the end of the day, it's a therapist's day at work, and therapists hear things that sometimes may be like, wow, something that maybe they personally judge or whatever. So it's something that like, as a potential client would be something that I would maybe be looking at and be like, I want to make sure I could trust this person, especially what like they're putting out there on social media.
Use it to your advantage, scroll through their content, make sure it's like, yeah, you could see a lot. I think you could see a lot from social media, which is why we try to do what we do, which is like get people to share their professional voice, because you can really see like how, even just like their vibe, you know,
their personality, their vibe, how they communicate, like you get a kind of a vibe for them. And then also like kind of what we spoke about before, as far as a therapist getting defensive, like I'm sure it's hard from the therapist perspective. If let's say a client shares something that like they didn't agree with, or maybe doesn't even share it in like the best way, like you don't want a therapist to ever like get defensive or offended, because it's not supposed to be something that they're taking personally, and they're supposed to be able to be like, let you be as vulnerable as you need to be.
Exactly.
So I would think that would be a red flag. And then another red flag would be you don't feel safe to discuss everything with that person, and you need to self-filter. Like if you're filtering yourself, like this is the place you're not supposed to be filtering. And if you're filtering, then that might not be the right relationship for you, therapeutic relationship. And then another red flag would be finding your therapy is providing no additional insight into like your experience or actions. For a while, for a couple of months, I was like virtually seeing a therapist through one of these like typical therapy platforms. And it was like so unhelpful. It was just me really regurgitating my day. And the therapist really like barely provided any insight. And I knew that this wasn't helpful, but it becomes difficult because sometimes you just really want to help yourself. You want, and it's hard to end those relationships too. That's probably a whole nother conversation for you. But
you could use a lot of the skills we spoke about today. You know, like anyone could use a lot of the skills we spoke about today, like asserting yourself on, you know, like this is not working out for me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So that would be another red flag if you're not getting any sort of like insight.
Additional insight, right? I love that. And sometimes the additional insight could be counter, like intuitive to what you thought you wanted. Maybe like it's hard to hear what the therapist provides, or maybe or the coach provides, or whatever that person is to you. But sometimes it's something, you know, you needed to hear, maybe not, maybe they're way off the mark, but then you can go back and communicate that. I think also just a point on like the needing to self-filter. I think ideally, yes, you don't want to be have to self-filter in therapy. But I think that I know many people ask us at OK Clarity, like, it's hard for me to open up. It's hard for me to open up. Like, that's a very common thing. So I just want to, that doesn't mean you're in the wrong therapy. It means that you are in a process. And if you feel like you're making progress towards opening up more and more with each session, that can mean that you're in the very right place, right? Because I feel like everybody has a different threshold of how safe they feel with with people and how they can open up over time. So just wanted to put that out there, that it's not like
that's fear. So then I would revise what I said to being something that you actually would want to share with a therapist, but you specifically feel like you can't share it with this one, like for a certain reason. Like maybe they would judge you, or you're just going back to like not feeling safe with that person. But fear.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, I think that also many times in therapy, like, I mean, maybe you've never had this, but like, I think it's very common for people to feel like if I say this, they're going to judge me. But then being able to muster up the strength to say it, maybe give that preamble of like, I'm afraid you're going to judge me, and have that be like a learning experience of like, oh, wow, you actually didn't judge me. Or actually, I felt judged. And can we like, you know, decipher that right now, because that's not cool. Like, I don't want to feel judged. And a good person will be able to work through that with you. So like, that's bringing in your full self, you know? And I think that especially like with dating in our community, like having a therapist that understands that process, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, is like so important. Because not that dating and the whole like situation is, you know, completely resolved outside the community, but definitely I feel like our community is one that brings so much more nuance to this stage of life. And, you know, it can be hard to feel completely like chill with somebody that really doesn't get it, because then it's like you have to really explain yourself with every word that comes out of your mouth, like, you know. So I think that's really important too. Okay, amazing. I feel like we really did this justice. Do you have any final closing words you want to say?
I don't think so. I think we said a lot.
We're talked out. I have like a lonesome cookie sitting here. Like I was like supposed to be munching on a cookie, and I didn't.
So sad. Well, I'm glad we didn't get cut off at 60 minutes, because we totally went over.
I didn't even know that there's such a thing that you get cut off.
There is. Sometimes Instagram doesn't like you, and then it cuts you off. But
well, they must like us. They must like us. Look at that. Instagram not rejecting us. They feel like we've had enough rejection in our dating life.
But yeah, no, I think this was a great conversation. I hope some of this was helpful to people.
Yeah, I hope it is, and I think it is. Like when I was preparing for this live tonight, and I never do a live on Motzei Shabbos, this was like way out of my comfort zone. And I was like thinking to myself, actually my mom said, she's like, you're going to be helping so many people. I'm like, as soon as she said that, I was like, I feel so much better about this right now. So I do hope that was helpful. Thank you, Emuna, for saying that this was. Yeah, I would love feedback. So please, like your community to share feedback, OK Clarity community to share feedback. If you have, you know, specific questions, maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. But I think this was like a great foundational piece for people to like really, I think it was validating, empathizing, but also giving like tangible skills that you could use, whether it's in therapy, whether it's in dating, to just like live more like happy, healthy, and whole. That's my goal here.
I like that.
All right. Thank you so much, Chanie. Thank you everyone for tuning in. It was a nice number of people, and have a great rest of the night.
Thanks, Faye.
Take care.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.